The day I discovered my son-in-law had been planning to throw me out of my own home for months was the day I realized family isn't always defined by blood or marriage. Sometimes, family is defined by who stays when everyone else walks away. Hello, my name is Michael Carter. I'm 60 years old and I live, or used to live, in a brownstone in Brooklyn, New York. For 35 years, I taught high school English at Midwood High, guiding thousands of teenagers through Steinbeck and Shakespeare, helping them find meaning in words written centuries before they were born. Words that still matter. Words about loyalty, betrayal, and justice. I thought I understood these themes well enough from literature. I never expected to live them. My wife, Sarah, passed away 3 years ago after a brief but brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. We'd been married for 32 years, high school sweethearts who built a life around books, Central Park walks, and our daughter Melissa. Sarah's death left me rattling around in our 3-story brownstone, a house that had once felt just right but suddenly seemed cavernous with just one person. When Melissa suggested she and her husband Robert move in with me 6 months after Sarah's passing, it seemed like Providence. "Dad, you shouldn't be alone in that big house," she said over Sunday dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant in Little Italy. And honestly, Rob and I could use the help with saving for our own place. New York real estate is impossible for young couples now. Robert nodded enthusiastically, his arm around my daughter's shoulder. "We'd be helping each other out, Michael. And I promise we won't cramp your style," he added with a wink. I should have recognized the calculation behind his smile. At first, the arrangement worked beautifully. Melissa took over her mother's garden in the small backyard, bringing color back to a space I'd neglected in my grief. Robert, a financial advisor at a midtown firm, occasionally asked for my advice on dealing with difficult clients, and I enjoyed our talks over whiskey in the evening. For the first time since Sarah died, the house felt alive again. Then came the subtle shifts. Robert began suggesting renovations. "To modernize the place," he said. A contractor appeared one day to measure the master bedroom, my bedroom. "Just exploring options," Robert explained when I questioned him. I started finding real estate brochures for senior living communities on the kitchen counter. "Just thought you might want to browse," Melissa said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Some of these places have amazing amenities." I ignored the hints, choosing to believe my daughter wouldn't push me out of my own home. The home where I'd carried her through the door as a newborn. The home where Sarah and I had built our life together. The truth came on a crisp October morning. I was in my study, grading papers for the creative writing workshop I taught part-time at the community center, when I overheard Robert on the phone in the kitchen below. "Dad, I've told you it's happening," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the heating vent. "Michael just doesn't know it yet. By Christmas, the brownstone will be ready for you and Mom to move in." I froze, pen hovering over a student's poem about betrayal. How fitting. "No, he won't fight it," Robert continued. "Melissa's working on him. We'll suggest he moves to Sunshine Gardens. It's perfect for people his age. He can't maintain this place anyway." I sat there, blood pounding in my ears, as my son-in-law continued detailing how they would essentially evict me from my own home to install his parents instead. The casual cruelty of it struck me like a physical blow. Not only was I being discarded, but I was being deceived by my own daughter. That night at dinner, I watched them both with new eyes. Melissa, Sarah's daughter, with her mother's dimples and kind eyes, now seemed like a stranger to me. Had she always been this person? Or had Robert's influence changed her? Robert ate my food, drank my wine, and smiled at me with the confidence of a man who believes he's already won. "Dad, we were thinking," Melissa began, right on cue. "There's an open house at Sunshine Gardens this weekend. Maybe we could go take a look, just to see if you like it." I met her eyes across the table. "Why would I want to look at a retirement home? I'm not even eligible for Medicare yet." Robert jumped in smoothly. "It's not really a retirement home, Michael. It's an active adult community. People your age who want to downsize but still live independently." "People my age," I repeated slowly. "And what about this house?" A glance passed between them, quick, but I caught it. "Well," Melissa said, "we thought we might stay here. It makes sense with us trying to save for our own place. Property values in Brooklyn are only going up, so it's a smart investment to hold on to it." "My investment," I said quietly. "My home." Robert cleared his throat. "Michael, let's be practical. This place is too big for one person. You're rattling around here alone when we're not home. Don't you want companionship? Activities? Sunshine Gardens has a book club." A book club. 35 years teaching literature, and my son-in-law thought he could pacify me with a retirement community book club, where we'd probably read Nicholas Sparks novels and call it literature. I could have exploded then, confronted them with what I knew. But something held me back, a coldness settling in my chest, a clarity of thought. If I revealed that I'd overheard Robert's plans, they would simply adjust their strategy, not abandon it. "I'll think about visiting," I said instead, taking a sip of wine. Relief washed over their faces. They thought I was surrendering. That night, I lay awake in the bedroom I'd shared with Sarah for 3 decades, staring at the ceiling and feeling the profound weight of betrayal. Not just from Robert, I'd never fully trusted him anyway, but from Melissa, my little girl, who once claimed I hung the moon. "What would you do, Sarah?" I whispered to the empty side of the bed. I could almost hear her answer. "Fight, Michael, but fight smart." By morning, I had a plan. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. I would use the skills I'd spent a lifetime teaching. Observation, research, careful plotting. If Robert wanted to play games with my life, he'd learn his father-in-law was far from the doddering old man he apparently thought I was. I called in sick to the community center for the first time in 3 years. Instead of teaching, I spent the day making phone calls and visiting my bank. By afternoon, I had appointments with my lawyer and with a private investigator who specialized in financial matters. Robert thought he understood money and power. He was about to learn otherwise. Within a week of overhearing Robert's conversation, I had transformed our small home office into my war room. Each night after they went to bed, I'd slip inside, close the door, and work on understanding exactly what I was up against. The private investigator I hired, a retired NYPD detective named Gloria Ramirez, moved with impressive efficiency. Financial predators targeting older family members. "I've seen it too many times," she told me during our first meeting at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my home. "Usually it's subtle, gradual. This son-in-law of yours isn't even trying to be clever about it." Gloria's initial report revealed that Robert wasn't the financial success he portrayed. Despite his expensive suits and confident demeanor, he was drowning in debt. Credit cards, personal loans, and gambling debts that would make a loan shark nervous. His job at the financial firm was on thin ice after several clients complained about aggressive, questionable investment advice. "He needs your house," Gloria said bluntly. "Not just for his parents, though that part's probably true too, but because he's desperate for assets. I'd bet good money he's planning to refinance once you're out of the picture. This information should have shocked me, but somehow it didn't. It merely confirmed the unease I'd felt about Robert from the beginning, an unease I'd suppressed for Melissa's sake. But the real betrayal came when Gloria handed me a stack of papers. "Your daughter's involved too. She signed documents as a witness for power of attorney forms you apparently signed giving Robert control over your finances." My hands shook as I examined the forgeries. My signature, almost perfectly replicated, authorizing Robert to make financial decisions on my behalf. The witness signature was unmistakably Melissa's actual handwriting. "This is fraud," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Absolutely," Gloria confirmed. "And it gets worse. They've already put the paperwork in motion to add their names to your property deed. Once that happens, they can legally sell or mortgage the house without your consent." I stared out the coffee shop window at the busy New York street, people rushing past, wrapped in their own lives, their own dramas. How many of them were being betrayed by the people they loved most? "You have two choices," Gloria continued, her voice softening slightly. "You can go to the police. This is clear fraud, and they'd both face criminal charges. Or—" She paused. "Or," I prompted. "Or you can fight fire with fire. Beat them at their own game." Before I continue, if this story has touched you so far, please hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps me share more stories like this. After my meeting with Gloria, I walked home through Prospect Park, autumn leaves crunching under my feet, trying to reconcile the daughter I thought I knew with the woman who had signed those documents. Where had I gone wrong? Had I spoiled her? Had I been too absorbed in my work, too absent from her life? Or was Robert's influence that powerful? That evening, Melissa made my favorite dinner, pot roast with roasted potatoes, just like her mother used to make. As I watched her move around the kitchen, humming softly, I searched for signs of deception. Was there guilt behind her smile? Calculation in her kindness? "You've been quiet lately, Dad," she remarked as she set the table. "Everything okay at the community center?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just tired. One of my students is writing a fascinating story about betrayal. Makes me think a lot about human nature. A flicker of something. Discomfort? Fear?" Crossed her face before she laughed. "Always the English teacher. Even your small talk is literary." Robert arrived home, kissing Melissa's cheek before clapping me on the shoulder. "Michael, how was your day? Consider that retirement community yet?" The casual way he asked, as if my displacement was a foregone conclusion, made my blood boil. But I kept my expression neutral, remembering Gloria's advice. Don't show your hand too early. "Actually, I've been thinking about financial matters," I said casually. "Sarah and I were always careful with money. I should probably review my investments, make sure everything's in order." Robert's posture changed subtly. He leaned forward, interest sharpening his gaze. "I'd be happy to look things over for you. No charge for family," he added with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "That's kind of you," I replied, "but I've already set up an appointment with a financial advisor at my bank. Professional boundaries and all that." His smile faltered just enough to confirm my suspicions. "Well, at least let me come with you. Make sure they don't take advantage of you." The irony was almost too much. After dinner, I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door before retrieving the burner phone Gloria had insisted I use for our communications. I texted her a simple message, moving forward with Plan B. Her reply came seconds later. "Smart choice. Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m., same place." I slept surprisingly well that night, the decision made. I would not go quietly into a retirement community. I would not surrender the home where Sarah and I had built our life together. And I would not allow Robert's financial desperation to destroy what remained of my family. The next morning, I told Melissa I was meeting former colleagues for breakfast. Not a complete lie, as Gloria had arranged for us to meet with Dennis Kwan, a former student of mine who had become a financial attorney specializing in elder law. Mr. Carter, Dennis greeted me warmly at the discreet law office in Manhattan. When Gloria called, I couldn't believe someone would try this with you, of all people. You taught us the Merchant of Venice. The pound of flesh which I demand of him is dearly bought. 'Tis mine, and I will have it. I smiled at the aptness of the quote. I'm hoping for a solution less bloody than Shylock's, but just as effective. Dennis laid out our strategy. We've already frozen your accounts and flagged the fraudulent power of attorney. That's defensive. But Gloria says you want to go on the offensive. I do, I confirmed. Robert needs to learn that actions have consequences. Gloria placed a folder on the table. As requested, I've compiled everything on Robert's debts. The gambling debts are the most interesting. He owes $217,000 to some very impatient people. Dennis whistled low. That would explain the urgency in getting control of your house. Can we use this? I asked. Gloria and Dennis exchanged glances before Dennis nodded. We can do something both legal and poetically just. We can buy his debt. What does that mean exactly? I asked. It means, Gloria explained, that instead of Robert owing money to credit card companies and loan sharks, he'll owe it to you. You'll become his creditor, with all the power that entails. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its potential. I would use a portion of my retirement savings to purchase Robert's debts from his various creditors, many of whom would be happy to recoup even a percentage of what they were owed rather than writing off the debt entirely. Once we own his debt, we control the terms, Dennis explained. We can call it due immediately, work out a payment plan, or even forgive it entirely, whatever serves your purpose best. I thought about it for less than a minute before nodding. Do it. Buy everything you can. This won't be cheap, Gloria warned. Even negotiating the debts down, we're talking about a significant investment. I've spent 35 years teaching teenagers about justice in literature, I said quietly. I can think of no better use for my savings than to see it served in reality. Over the next 2 weeks, as Melissa and Robert increased their pressure campaign about Sunshine Gardens, Dennis and Gloria worked tirelessly behind the scenes. I maintained my facade of reluctant consideration, even allowing them to drive me to an open house at the retirement community. See, Dad, isn't it nice? Melissa said brightly as we toured the sterile apartments with their emergency pull cords and grab bars in the showers. It's very safe, I replied, watching Robert charm the facility director, no doubt inquiring about waiting lists and deposit requirements. On the drive home, Robert couldn't contain his enthusiasm. I think we should put down a deposit right away. Units like that don't stay available long. I stared out the window at my beloved Brooklyn neighborhoods passing by. It's a big decision. I'd like to sleep on it. Dad, Melissa said, reaching back to touch my knee, we're only thinking about what's best for you. The sincerity in her voice almost made me doubt everything, almost made me wonder if I'd misunderstood, if perhaps they genuinely believed this was the right thing. Then I remembered the forged documents, the secret phone calls, the lies. That night Gloria texted, "It's done. We own 82% of Robert's debt. Meeting tomorrow to discuss next steps." I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the New York skyline, the city lights blurring through unexpected tears. This wasn't how I'd imagined spending my retirement years, locked in financial combat with my own family. But as Sarah used to say when facing difficult parent-teacher conferences, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is hold someone accountable for their actions. Tomorrow, Robert would learn exactly who he was dealing with. November in New York brought an early cold snap, frosting the windows of my brownstone and sending steam billowing from the manholes on my morning walk to meet Gloria and Dennis. The city felt different now, sharper, more dangerous, but also more alive than it had since Sarah's passing. There's nothing like betrayal to awaken your senses. We've acquired $287,000 of Robert's debt, Dennis announced as soon as I sat down in the small conference room at his law office. That's more than we initially identified. Gloria nodded grimly. Your son-in-law has been busy. The additional debts are recent, within the last month. He's accelerating his plans. What does that mean for us? I asked, wrapping my cold hands around a mug of coffee. It means he's desperate, Dennis said. And desperate people make mistakes. Gloria pushed a tablet across the table, showing me a surveillance photo of Robert leaving a building in Midtown. He's been meeting with mortgage brokers. Based on our information, he's trying to secure a loan against your house, using those forged power of attorney documents. My stomach tightened. Can he succeed? Not now, Dennis assured me. We've filed alerts with all the relevant financial institutions. Any attempt to use those documents will raise immediate red flags. But the fact that he's trying tells us he needs money fast. Gambling debts, Gloria added. The people he owes aren't known for their patience. I thought about Melissa. How much did she know about the extent of Robert's financial troubles? Was she a willing accomplice or another victim of his manipulation? So what's our next move? I asked. Dennis leaned forward. We have 3 options. 1. We call in all the debt immediately, which would financially destroy him. 2. We work out a payment plan with terms favorable to us. Or 3, and this is the most interesting option, we use the debt as leverage to get exactly what we want. Which is? I prompted, though I already knew. A complete reversal of their plans, Dennis said. They leave your house. They acknowledge your ownership. They abandon any claim to your property or finances. And they do it all quietly, without dragging the family through public court proceedings. I considered each option carefully. Complete financial destruction of Robert would be satisfying, but would devastate Melissa too. A payment plan wouldn't address the underlying betrayal. The third option offered both justice and the possibility of salvaging something from this wreckage. The third option, I decided, but I want to be the one to deliver the message. Gloria raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's wise? It could get emotional. I thought about the Shakespeare quote Dennis had referenced earlier, about the pound of flesh. Revenge might be satisfying, but was it what I truly wanted? What would Sarah advise? I need to see their faces, I said finally. I need to understand if there's anything worth saving here. Dennis nodded. We'll prepare everything. When do you want to do this? Tonight, I said decisively. I don't want to spend another night under the same roof with them, pretending I don't know what they're planning. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparations. Dennis drafted documents for Robert to sign, acknowledging the debt transfer and agreeing to our terms. Gloria compiled a comprehensive file documenting the fraud attempt, including copies of the forged power of attorney forms. By the time I returned home that evening, everything was in place. I texted Gloria from my front steps. "I'm going in. Stand by." Gloria and Dennis were parked a block away, ready to intervene if necessary. They had wanted to come in with me, but this was something I needed to do alone. I found Robert and Melissa in the kitchen, heads bent together over a laptop, their expressions serious. They jumped when I entered, quickly closing the screen. "Dad," Melissa said, too brightly. "We didn't hear you come in." "Clearly," I replied, setting my briefcase on the kitchen counter. "I think we need to talk." Robert glanced at his watch. "Can it wait? We have dinner reservations at 7. "No," I said firmly. "It can't wait. This has waited too long already. Where are you listening from?" Something in my tone must have alerted them. Melissa's smile faltered, and Robert straightened, adopting the slightly condescending expression he used when explaining financial concepts he assumed I wouldn't understand. "What's on your mind, Michael?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "I know everything." The words hung in the air between us. Melissa's eyes widened, but Robert maintained his composure, the mark of a practiced liar. "Everything about what?" he asked smoothly. "The forged power of attorney. The plans to refinance my house. Your gambling debts. The scheme to move me to Sunshine Gardens so you can install your parents here." I paused, looking directly at my daughter. "All of it." Melissa went pale, but Robert simply laughed, though it sounded forced even to my ears. "Michael, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I cut him off, opening my briefcase and laying out copies of the fraudulent documents on the counter. "These forgeries are a criminal offense. So is attempting to use them to secure a mortgage." Robert's demeanor changed instantly, his charming facade dropping away to reveal something harder, colder. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can prove everything," I replied calmly. "The real question is whether I'll be proving it to the police or just to you." Melissa found her voice at last. "Dad, please, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I asked, turning to her. "Explain to me why you witnessed my forged signature on documents giving Robert control over my finances." Tears welled in her eyes. "He said it was just a precaution, that we needed to make sure we could help you if something happened. Like with Mom, remember how complicated it was because she didn't have everything in order. Sarah had died with her affairs in perfect order, a fact Melissa knew well. Her willingness to rewrite even this history for Robert's benefit was perhaps the most painful revelation yet. And moving me to Sunshine Gardens? Was that just a precaution, too?" Robert stepped forward, abandoning pretense. "You're being selfish, Michael. This house is wasted on one person. My parents need a place to live, and Melissa and I need the financial security this property provides. You should be helping your family, not holding us back." "My family," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you are? People who lie to me, forge my signature, and plot to take my home." Melissa began to cry in earnest now. "Dad, please. What would your mother think of this?" I asked quietly. The question hit her like a physical blow. She sank into a kitchen chair, covering her face with her hands. Robert, however, remained defiant. "This is ridiculous. You have no proof that would stand up in court. It's your word against ours." I reached back into my briefcase and pulled out the final document. "This might interest you, then." Robert snatched the paper, his expression changing as he read. It was a notice informing him that his debts, credit cards, personal loans, and yes, his gambling debts, had been purchased by Carter Family Holdings, LLC, a company Dennis had helped me establish that morning. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. "I own your debt now, Robert," I said calmly. "All $287,000 of it. And unlike your previous creditors, I'm calling it due immediately." The blood drained from his face. "That's impossible. You couldn't." "Oh, but I did," I assured him. "Turns out those financial lessons you thought I needed? I already knew them. I just never thought I'd need to use them against family." Melissa looked up, confusion mixing with her tears. "Dad, what does this mean?" "It means," I explained gently, "that Robert owes me nearly $300,000 today. And if he can't pay, which we know he can't, there are consequences." "You wouldn't," Robert said, but the certainty had left his voice. "I don't want to," I admitted, "which is why I'm offering you an alternative." I removed the final document from my briefcase, the agreement Dennis had prepared. "You both move out of my house within 48 hours. You sign a statement admitting to the forgery and fraud, which I'll hold but not file with the police as long as you comply with all terms. And you agree to family counseling if, and only if, we decide there's anything worth salvaging here." Robert scanned the document, his hands shaking slightly. "This is blackmail." "No," I corrected him. "This is consequence. Something you apparently need to learn about." Melissa rose from her chair, moving toward me hesitantly. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't understand." I held up a hand, stopping her. "I don't want apologies tonight. I want decisions. You can sign the agreement and leave, or Robert can try to explain to his gambling creditors why he suddenly can't pay them." The mention of his gambling creditors made Robert flinch visibly. Those debts carried threats beyond mere financial penalty. "You have until morning to decide," I continued, gathering the documents back into my briefcase. "I'll be staying at a hotel tonight. When I return tomorrow, I expect your answer." "Where will we go?" Melissa asked, her voice small. "That," I said as I turned to leave, "is not my problem, just as my housing situation was apparently not yours." As I walked toward the door, Robert called after me, desperation creeping into his voice. "Michael, wait. We can talk about this. Work something out." I paused, looking back at him. "We are working something out, Robert. Just not on your terms anymore." Outside, the November air felt cleansing after the suffocating tension of the house. I texted Gloria, "It's done. Meeting you now." As I walked toward the car where they waited, I felt a curious lightness. The confrontation I dreaded was behind me. The betrayal was in the open. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my terms, not theirs. Gloria rolled down the window as I approached. "How did it go?" "As well as could be expected," I replied. "He tried denial, then threats, then bargaining." She cried. Dennis nodded sympathetically. "Family betrayals are always the hardest. What do you think they'll do?" I looked back at my brownstone, lights glowing in the windows against the darkening Brooklyn sky. For the first time since Sarah's death, I saw it not as a repository of memories, but as a battleground. "He'll take the deal," I said confidently. "He has no choice." Gloria raised an eyebrow. "And your daughter?" That was the question that had troubled me throughout the confrontation. Melissa had been manipulated, certainly, But she had also made choices that betrayed everything Sarah and I had taught her. "I don't know," I admitted. "But either way, I'll survive it. I survived losing Sarah. I can survive this too." As we drove away, I felt Sarah's presence more strongly than I had in months. Not in grief or longing, but in strength. She had always seen people clearly, had always understood that love sometimes requires hard truths. Tonight, I had honored that understanding. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. For now, it was enough to know I had reclaimed control of my story. I spent the night at the Carlisle, a luxury I rarely indulged in but felt necessary under the circumstances. The elegant hotel room with its view of Central Park provided a sanctuary while my home, the home Sarah and I had lovingly maintained for decades, was occupied by people I no longer recognized as family. After a mostly sleepless night, I met Gloria and Dennis for breakfast in the hotel restaurant. Dennis looked fresh and composed in a crisp suit. Gloria, ever practical, wore the same clothes as yesterday and nursed a large coffee. "Any word from them?" Gloria asked as I sat down. I checked my phone for the dozenth time. Nothing. No calls, no texts. Dennis buttered a piece of toast with methodical precision. That could be good or bad. Either they're consulting a lawyer, or they're packing, or destroying evidence, Gloria added grimly. The thought hadn't occurred to me. You think they would. People get desperate, she cut in. We should get back to the house sooner rather than later. We finished breakfast quickly and took a taxi back to Brooklyn. The morning was cold and bright, sunlight glinting off brownstone facades and bare tree branches. As we rounded the corner onto my street, Gloria pointed ahead. "Looks like we have our answer." A moving truck was parked in front of my house, two burly men carrying out furniture and boxes under Robert's supervision. Melissa was nowhere to be seen. "That was faster than expected," Dennis remarked as our taxi pulled to the curb. Robert spotted us immediately. His face hardened as I approached, but he maintained a professional demeanor in front of the movers. "We'll be out by noon," he said tersely. "I assume that meets your deadline." "It does," I confirmed, watching as the movers carried out the expensive leather sofa Robert had insisted on buying, with my money, I now realized, just months ago. "Where's Melissa?" Something flickered across Robert's face. Anger? Guilt? Before he replied. "Upstairs. Packing her things." I nodded toward the truck. "That's a lot of furniture for a couple with nowhere to go." "We have a place," he said stiffly. "A friend is letting us stay in his vacation home in the Hamptons until we sort things out." The irony wasn't lost on me. Even in defeat, Robert had landed on his feet, in a Hamptons vacation home, no less. "And the agreement?" I asked. Robert gestured toward the house. "On the kitchen counter. Signed by both of us." Gloria stepped forward. "I'll verify that while you check the house." I nodded, suddenly hesitant to enter my own home. What would I find inside? What damage, physical or emotional, had been done in the night? Dennis seemed to sense my reluctance. "I'll come with you," he offered. We entered through the front door, the familiar creak of the hinges welcoming me home. The entryway was intact, though emptier. Robert and Melissa had taken the antique hall table that had been a wedding gift to Sarah and me. Its absence left a dusty outline on the hardwood floor. The living room told a similar story, strategic removals of items they had brought or believed they were entitled to. The kitchen, however, showed signs of hasty departure. Cabinet doors stood open, drawers partially pulled out. On the counter, as promised, lay the signed agreement next to an envelope with my name written in Melissa's handwriting. I stared at it, making no move to pick it up. "Do you want me to read it first?" Dennis asked quietly. I shook my head. "No. But can you check the rest of the house? I need a moment." As Dennis departed to inspect the upper floors, I finally reached for the envelope. Inside was a single page, covered in Melissa's familiar handwriting. "Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it. What we did, was unforgivable. I've spent the night trying to understand how I became someone who could betray her own father, and I still don't have answers that make sense. Robert told me we were helping you, that you were struggling alone in this big house, that his parents needed a place to live because they'd lost everything in bad investments, that it would be temporary. One lie built on another until I couldn't see the truth anymore. I knew about the forged documents. I witnessed them. I lied to you about them. There's no excuse for that. The more I learned about the gambling debts, about the real plan to take your house permanently, the more I told myself it was too late to back out, that you would never forgive me if you knew, so the only way forward was to keep going. I was wrong. So wrong. I'm leaving with Robert today because I made vows and I still believe in them, even if he doesn't. But I'm leaving him too, Dad. As soon as we're out of your house, I'm going to my friend Jennifer's place. I've already called a divorce lawyer. I don't expect this to change anything between us. I just wanted you to know that in the end, I chose to be your daughter rather than his wife. It's the only right choice I've made in months. I love you. I'm sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of being Sarah Carter's daughter again. Melissa." I read the letter twice, then set it down carefully on the counter. The emotions washing through me were too complex to name. Grief, relief, cautious hope, lingering anger. Gloria entered the kitchen, the signed agreement in her hand. "It's all in order," she confirmed. "They've acknowledged the fraud, agreed to all our terms." She paused, studying my face. "Are you okay?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. Dennis returned from upstairs. "The bedrooms are mostly cleared out. They've left a few things, but nothing valuable. No damage that I could see." I nodded, still processing Melissa's letter. "What now?" Gloria asked. It was a good question. The immediate crisis was resolved. My home was secure, Robert's threat neutralized. But the emotional aftermath stretched before me like uncharted territory. "Now," I said slowly, "I reclaim my house, and decide what kind of father I want to be to a daughter who betrayed me but might still be worth saving." Gloria and Dennis exchanged glances. "For what it's worth," Gloria said carefully, "in my experience, people who realize they've done wrong and take responsibility without being forced to, those people are rare, and worth giving a second chance." "Not immediately," Dennis added. "Trust has to be rebuilt slowly. But eventually." I folded Melissa's letter and returned it to the envelope. "I need time." They both nodded, understanding. "We should finish the inspection," Dennis suggested. "Make sure everything is as it should be." We walked through the entire house, room by room. Most spaces showed signs of hasty departure: emptied drawers, missing personal items, the occasional forgotten sock or book. My home office had been left untouched, as had Sarah's reading room, which I'd maintained exactly as she left it. In the master bedroom I found another surprise: the family photo albums, neatly stacked on the bed with another note from Melissa. "These belong here." A small gesture, but a meaningful one. By noon, the moving truck was gone, and Robert with it. Gloria and Dennis prepared to leave as well, their mission accomplished. "We'll follow up on the legal details," Dennis assured me at the door. "Make sure everything is properly documented. And the debt remains a powerful tool if they ever decide to challenge the agreement." Gloria handed me her card. "Call if you need anything. Anything at all." After they departed, I stood alone in the entryway of my reclaimed home. The silence felt different now, not the silence of abandonment after Sarah's death, nor the false domesticity of Melissa and Robert's residence. This was the silence of possibility, of choices yet to be made. I walked slowly through each room, mentally reclaiming the spaces. In the living room, I moved chairs back to their original positions, the arrangement Sarah had preferred. In the kitchen, I closed cabinets and straightened drawers, restoring order. As evening approached, I found myself in Sarah's reading room, sitting in her favorite armchair. The November sun cast long shadows across the bookshelves, illuminating spines of novels she had loved. Austen, Eliot, Morrison. "What would you do, Sarah?" I asked aloud, a habit I developed during the lonely months after her death. No answer came, of course. But as I sat there, surrounded by her books, I felt a clarity I'd been lacking. Sarah had always believed in second chances. She'd built her life around the idea that people could learn, grow, change. As a teacher, I'd supposedly believed the same. I reached for my phone and composed a text to the number I knew belonged to my daughter. "I got your letter. When you're settled, we should talk. Not soon, but someday." I didn't expect an immediate reply, but one came within minutes. "Thank you, Dad. I'll wait until you're ready." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was an opening, a crack in the door I'd been prepared to close forever. Outside, New York continued its eternal rush, people hurrying home as darkness fell. Inside, I began the slow process of rebuilding, not just my home, but the parts of myself that had been damaged by betrayal. The house felt emptier without Melissa and Robert, but also cleaner somehow, as if a fever had broken. I ordered takeout from the Chinese restaurant Sarah and I had frequented for decades, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, and raised a glass to my empty dining room. "To reclaiming what's mine," I said aloud, "and to whatever comes next." 2 weeks passed before I heard the rumors. I was at Barney's Deli, ordering my usual Saturday morning bagel and coffee, when Marge, the owner who'd known Sarah and me for 20 years, leaned across the counter with concern etched on her face. "Michael, is it true? About Robert?" I stiffened. "What about him?" "That he's in trouble. Bad trouble." She lowered her voice. "Jimmy Vega's nephew works security at Mount Sinai. Says Robert was brought in Tuesday night. Beaten pretty badly." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "I hadn't heard. Thought you might have, what with him being family and all." She studied my face. "Though I remember Sarah telling me once that family isn't always who you're related to." I nodded, processing this information. "Thanks for letting me know, Marge." Outside, Brooklyn was enjoying a rare warm November day. People filled the sidewalks, soaking up what might be the last comfortable weekend before winter set in properly. I walked slowly, my mind racing. Robert in the hospital, beaten. It wasn't difficult to guess why. When we'd purchased his gambling debts, Dennis had warned me that some of the creditors might not take kindly to the transfer. "These aren't banks we're dealing with," he'd explained. "They have their own methods of enforcement." I hadn't considered the possibility that by buying Robert's debts, and then not immediately pursuing them, I might have inadvertently painted a target on his back. The loan sharks would assume he'd found money somewhere, and they would want their cut. At home, I called Gloria immediately. "I've heard," she said before I could explain. "My sources at the NYPD told me yesterday. 3 broken ribs, a fractured jaw, concussion." "Christ," I muttered. "Was it because of what we did?" Gloria was silent for a moment. "Not directly. From what I can gather, Robert tried to secure another loan from some very unpleasant people. Used the Hamptons' house as collateral, except it wasn't his to offer," I finished. "Exactly. When they discovered he'd lied, they expressed their displeasure. Physically." I sank into my armchair, a familiar guilt settling in my chest. "I never wanted this." "Of course you didn't," Gloria said firmly. "Robert made his choices. This is on him, not you." Logically, I knew she was right. I hadn't forced Robert to seek out loan sharks. I hadn't compelled him to lie about collateral. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that my actions had set these events in motion. "Have you heard from Melissa?" Gloria asked, changing the subject. "Just texts. She's staying with her friend Jennifer in Park Slope. Filed for divorce 3 days after they left my house. That can't be easy for her." I thought about Melissa's letter, her acknowledgement of her mistakes. No, it can't be. After hanging up, I paced my living room, torn between competing impulses. Part of me, a dark, vengeful part one didn't particularly like, felt Robert had received exactly what he deserved. But the teacher in me, the man who'd spent a lifetime believing in redemption and second chances, couldn't celebrate another person's suffering, especially when that suffering affected my daughter too. Before I could talk myself out of it, I texted Melissa. "I heard about Robert. Are you okay?" Her reply came almost instantly. "Not really. At the hospital now. It's bad, Dad." I hesitated only briefly before responding. "Which hospital?" 30 minutes later, I was walking through the antiseptic corridors of Mount Sinai, following a nurse's directions to Robert's room. I found Melissa sitting alone in the hallway outside, her face pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes. She looked up as I approached, surprise registering briefly before she stood. "Dad, I didn't expect. Thank you for coming." We stood awkwardly for a moment before I gestured to the empty chair beside hers. "May I?" She nodded, and we sat in silence for several minutes, the hospital bustle continuing around us. "How is he?" I finally asked. Melissa sighed deeply. "Stable. They had to wire his jaw shut. The ribs will heal on their own, but they're keeping him for observation because of the concussion." She paused. "They're also monitoring him for signs of addiction." This was new information. "Addiction?" She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Pills. Opioids. It started after a back injury last year. I didn't know how bad it was until—" She gestured vaguely toward the hospital room. "Until the doctors found the evidence in his blood work." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. Whatever Robert had done, addiction was a disease I wouldn't wish on anyone. Melissa finally looked at me directly. "Why are you here, Dad? After everything we did to you?" It was a fair question. Why had I come? Not for Robert, certainly. But sitting beside my daughter in this sterile hallway, I recognized the simple truth. "Because you're my daughter," I said quietly. "Sarah's daughter. And you're hurting." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't deserve your concern." "Maybe not," I acknowledged. "But that's the thing about family. Real family. It's not always about what we deserve. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Family, the very concept Robert had twisted to justify his schemes, was what had brought me here today. "Have you been to see him?" I asked. She nodded. "He can't talk much with the wired jaw, but he's been writing notes." She pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. "He wrote this for you, actually, in case you ever came." I took the paper reluctantly. Robert's normally precise handwriting was shaky, the effects of pain medication evident in the looping scroll. "Michael, I'm sorry. No excuses. I was wrong. You were right to do what you did. I would have done worse in your position. I'm getting help now. Too late for us, but not too late for me." I refolded the note carefully and returned it to Melissa. "Painkillers make people sentimental." "Maybe," she conceded. "Or maybe nearly dying in an alley puts things in perspective." We lapsed into silence again. A doctor passed, nodding professionally to Melissa. Nurses wheeled equipment down the hallway. The ordinary business of healing continued around us. "What happens now?" I asked eventually. Melissa ran a hand through her uncombed hair. "The divorce proceeds. Robert goes to rehab when he's released. His firm is actually covering it, surprisingly. They don't want the publicity of an employee with addiction issues being beaten by loan sharks." She attempted a small, humorless laugh. "As for me, I don't know. Jennifer's letting me stay with her for now, but I need to find my own place. Start over somehow." "And his parents?" "The ones who were supposed to move into my house." "They never needed a place to live," Melissa admitted. "That was just part of the lie. They have a beautiful home in Connecticut. They're coming tomorrow to see Robert, but—" She hesitated. "They're not exactly supportive. They see this as another failure in a long line of disappointments." I thought about family again, how we shape each other, for better or worse. Robert's parents had clearly contributed to the man he'd become, just as Sarah and I had shaped Melissa. "Would you like a coffee?" I offered, suddenly needing a break from the oppressive hospital atmosphere. "There's a decent cafe in the lobby." Melissa looked surprised, but nodded. "I'd like that." In the bustling hospital cafe, surrounded by medical staff grabbing quick breaks and worried family members fortifying themselves for difficult hours ahead, Melissa and I began the awkward process of rediscovering each other. We didn't discuss Robert or the betrayal directly. Instead, we talked about neutral topics: her work at the publishing house, my retirement plans, books we'd read recently. It was superficial conversation, the kind strangers might have. But it was a beginning. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot," Melissa said as we finished our coffees. "About what she would think of all this." "So have I admitted. "She would be disappointed in me," Melissa continued, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "But she would also tell me that one terrible choice doesn't define a life." It sounded exactly like something Sarah would say. For a moment, I could almost hear her voice, gentle but firm, reminding us both that compassion didn't preclude accountability. "She would be right," I said. "It doesn't define you. What you do next might, though." Melissa nodded, understanding the implicit challenge in my words. "I want to make this right, Dad. I know I can't undo what happened, but I want to try to rebuild something. If you'll let me." I thought about the empty brownstone waiting for me, the quiet evenings alone with books and memories. I thought about Sarah, who had always believed in the power of forgiveness, not the easy kind that dismissed wrongdoing, but the hard-earned kind that acknowledged harm and still chose to move forward. "I'm not ready to trust you again," I said honestly. "That will take time. A lot of time." "I understand," she said, disappointment evident despite her attempt to hide it. "But," I continued, "I am ready to give you the chance to earn that trust back. Slowly. On my terms." Hope flickered in her eyes, Sarah's eyes. "What terms?" "Weekly dinners," I decided. "Not at my house. Not yet. Somewhere neutral. We talk. Really talk. About what happened, why it happened, how we move forward. No shortcuts, no easy forgiveness." "I'd like that," she said softly. "And you find your own place," I added. "Stand on your own feet. Show me who you are without Robert's influence." She nodded firmly. "I already have some apartment viewings scheduled. Nothing fancy, but it will be mine." We returned to Robert's floor. The atmosphere between us shifted slightly. Not comfortable, not trusting, but perhaps less hostile than before. "Will you come in?" Melissa asked, gesturing toward Robert's room. "He's probably sleeping, but—" I shook my head. "No. My compassion has limits. I came for you, not him." She accepted this without argument. "Thank you for coming. For the coffee. For giving me a chance I'm not sure I deserve." "Sarah would want me to," I said. It wasn't the whole truth. Part of me wanted this too, wanted my daughter back, but it was easier to attribute the gesture to Sarah's influence. As I turned to leave, Melissa called after me softly, "Dad, the house, is it still the same?" I thought about the empty spaces where their furniture had been, the rearranged chairs, the quiet that had returned. Not exactly the same, but still standing. Still home. She nodded, understanding that I wasn't just talking about the brownstone. Outside the hospital, New York continued its Saturday rhythms. Joggers in Prospect Park, shoppers along Fifth Avenue, tourists crowding the High Line. I joined the flow of humanity, one more person carrying a complicated story through the city streets. The confrontation with Robert and Melissa had been necessary. Justice demanded it. But perhaps mercy had its place too. Not the blind mercy that enabled further harm, but the clear-eyed kind that left room for growth and change. As I walked home through familiar neighborhoods, I realized I was no longer looking backward at what had been lost, but forward to what might still be possible. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was movement in a direction Sarah would have approved. December arrived with a vengeance, blanketing Brooklyn in snow and transforming my neighborhood into a winter postcard. The cold kept most people indoors, but I found myself venturing out more often than I had in years, as if the external chill helped clarify my internal landscape. 3 weeks had passed since my hospital visit. True to our agreement, Melissa and I had met for dinner each Thursday at a neutral restaurant, first a quiet Italian place in Carroll Gardens, then a bustling Thai restaurant near her new job. The conversations were difficult, halting, sometimes painful, but necessary, like lancing a wound to let the poison out. "I was so afraid of disappointing you," she admitted during our second dinner, picking at her pad thai without much appetite. "After Mom died, you seemed so lost. I thought moving in would help, but then Robert started talking about how much the house was worth, how we could leverage it for our future, and somehow helping you became something else. I didn't offer absolution, but I listened. It was all I could give for now." By our third dinner, we had established a fragile rhythm, honest conversation followed by more ordinary topics, as if we needed breaks from the emotional heavy lifting. "I found an apartment," she announced over dessert, "in Cobble Hill. It's tiny, Basically a glorified closet with a kitchen, but the rent is manageable, and it's mine. When do you move in? I asked. Next weekend. She hesitated. I don't have much furniture. Most of what we took from your house. Robert kept it all. I considered this. I might have some things in storage. Pieces your mother and I kept when we downsized her parents' home. Nothing fancy, but solid furniture. The offer surprised us both. Really? You'd let me use those? Use, not have, I clarified. Consider it a loan until you're on your feet. It was a small gesture, but significant, the first tangible extension of help since the betrayal. Melissa recognized it for what it was, not forgiveness, but a step toward it. Thank you, she said simply. That weekend found me in a storage facility in Queens, sorting through furniture we'd kept from Sarah's family home. A solid oak dining table, 4 mismatched but sturdy chairs, a serviceable sofa, a double bed frame. Basic necessities for a fresh start. I hired movers to deliver everything to Melissa's new apartment the following Saturday. I didn't plan to be there myself. We weren't ready for that level of normalcy yet, but fate intervened in the form of a scheduling mix-up. The movers called that morning to say they could only come in the afternoon, by which time Melissa would be at work training for her new position at a small publishing house. I can meet them, I offered when she called in a panic. Give them access. Direct the placement. Are you sure? She asked, surprise evident in her voice. I know you didn't want. It's just practical, I said, more gruffly than necessary. No sense rescheduling when I'm available. That's how I found myself standing in my daughter's new apartment, a small one-bedroom with decent light and pre-war details partially obscured by chipped paint and outdated fixtures. The place was clean but bare, containing only a few boxes and a suitcase. As I directed the movers where to place each piece of furniture, I couldn't help noticing signs of Melissa's new life. A framed photo of Sarah and me on the kitchen counter. A bookshelf already assembled and filled with familiar titles, many from her childhood bedroom. No evidence of Robert anywhere. After the movers left, I found myself lingering, surveying the apartment with a critical eye. The furniture looked right in the space, the oak table warming the kitchen nook, the sofa fitting perfectly under the living room window. But something was missing. On impulse, I made a phone call. By the time Melissa arrived home that evening, exhausted from her training day, I had transformed the bare apartment into something approaching a home. Fresh sheets on the bed, Sarah's favorite quilt folded at the foot, towels in the bathroom, basic groceries in the refrigerator, a small potted plant on the windowsill, African violet, Sarah's favorite. I didn't plan to be there when she arrived. I'd intended to leave a note and go. But replacing a light bulb in the hallway took longer than expected, and suddenly the door was opening, and Melissa was standing there, her expression shifting from exhaustion to shock to something more complex. "Dad," she breathed. "What is all this?" I climbed down from the stepladder awkwardly, feeling caught in an act of tenderness I wasn't ready to acknowledge. The furniture arrived. I just made it functional. She set down her bag and moved slowly through the apartment, touching each addition with reverent fingers. When she reached the African violet, her composure finally broke. "Mom's favorite," she whispered, tears welling. I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. "Why?" she asked, turning to face me. "After everything." I thought about Sarah then, how she'd filled our first apartment with similar touches when we were just starting out, newly married and painfully broke. How she'd made bare walls and second-hand furniture feel like home with nothing more than care and attention to detail. "Because this is what we do," I said finally. "It's what she would have done." Melissa nodded, understanding. In our family, our real family, not the facade Robert had tried to create, this was how love expressed itself. Not in grand gestures or empty promises, but in practical acts of care. Sheets on beds, food in refrigerators, light bulbs changed. "Thank you," she said simply. I nodded, gathering my tools. "I should go." "Stay," she blurted. "Just for dinner. I can make pasta. The kitchen works now, apparently." The invitation hung between us, fragile and hopeful. It was too soon for easy companionship, too soon to pretend the breach had been healed. And yet, "Pasta sounds good," I said. We ate at the oak table that had once graced Sarah's parents' dining room, making careful conversation about Melissa's new job, my volunteer work at the community center, neutral topics that wouldn't strain our fragile détente. But as the meal progressed, something shifted, not dramatically, but perceptibly. A loosening of tension, a cautious step toward something like normal. "Have you heard anything about Robert?" I asked eventually, the question I'd been avoiding. Melissa's expression tightened slightly. "He's out of the hospital, in rehab in Connecticut, near his parents. The divorce is proceeding, but his lawyers are trying to delay, hoping I'll change my mind." "Will you?" I couldn't help asking. She shook her head firmly. "No, that's finished." She hesitated before adding, "I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand how I became someone who could do what I did. To you, to myself." "And?" I prompted when she fell silent. "And it's a process," she said with a small smile that reminded me painfully of Sarah. "Turns out there's no quick fix for betraying your father and nearly destroying your life." The frankness startled a laugh out of me. "No, I suppose there wouldn't be." After dinner, I helped her wash the few dishes we'd used, working in companionable silence. As I prepared to leave, Melissa handed me a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it when you get home," she said. "It's not much, but it's a start." Curiosity gnawed at me during the subway ride back to my brownstone. The package sat on my lap, unremarkable in appearance but somehow significant. I waited until I was settled in my favorite chair, a glass of whiskey at hand, before carefully unwrapping it. Inside was a book, not just any book, but a first edition of Steinbeck's East of Eden, a novel I'd taught countless times and often cited as my favorite exploration of family complexity and moral choice. The inscription inside read simply, "To Dad, we have a choice. Always. Love, Melissa." The quote was from the novel itself, a reference to the concept of timshel, the Hebrew word Steinbeck had used to represent human free will and moral choice. "Thou mayest. You have the choice to overcome sin, to write your own moral destiny." I ran my fingers over the inscription, recognizing the gesture for what it was, not a request for easy forgiveness, but an acknowledgment of responsibility, a recognition that what had happened was a choice, and what would happen next would also be a choice, for both of us. The book now sits on my bedside table, a daily reminder of betrayal and possibility, of endings and beginnings. I haven't told Melissa yet, but I've made my choice too, to try to rebuild what was broken, however long it takes, however difficult the process. Because some things, once shattered, can never be made whole again, but they can be transformed into something new, something that honors the original while acknowledging the breaks. The Japanese call it kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold, treating breakage as part of the object's history rather than something to disguise. Our family will never be what it was. The betrayal created fractures too deep to simply disappear. But perhaps, with time and care, we can create something new from the pieces, something that doesn't hide the damage but incorporates it, acknowledging both the pain and the healing. I don't know if we'll succeed. Trust, once broken, is the most difficult thing to restore. But as I sit in my reclaimed home, surrounded by memories of Sarah and hope for Melissa, I find myself willing to try. Because in the end, that's what Sarah would have done. And despite everything, I still want to be the man she believed I was. Spring came early to Brooklyn the following year, coaxing crocuses from the small garden behind my brownstone and bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed almost too on the nose for my circumstances. I'd spent the winter in a holding pattern, teaching my community center classes, meeting Melissa weekly for our standing dinner, and gradually, cautiously rebuilding something from the ruins of our relationship. Robert remained on the periphery of our lives, a shadow that occasionally darkened conversations but no longer dominated them. He'd completed his rehabilitation program and, according to Melissa, had moved to Chicago to work for his uncle's financial firm, a fresh start facilitated by family connections I suspected he didn't deserve. His parents paid off the remainder of his gambling debts, Melissa told me during our dinner in late March. They mortgaged their Connecticut house to do it. I nodded, unsurprised. And the divorce? Final next month, she said with evident relief. My lawyer says there won't be any last-minute complications. Robert's finally accepted it's over. We were dining at a new restaurant near Brooklyn Heights, an upscale place Melissa had suggested to celebrate her promotion at the publishing house. 6 months into her new job, she'd already advanced from editorial assistant to junior editor, her natural talent for nurturing authors finally finding its proper channel. "I'm proud of you," I said, the words coming more easily than they would have months ago. Her smile, Sarah's smile, brightened the candlelit space between us. "That means a lot." After dinner, we walked along the promenade, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the East River. The spring air carried a hint of warmth, a promise of summer to come. "Dad," Melissa began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about the house." I stiffened slightly. The brownstone remained a sensitive subject between us, the site of betrayal not easily forgotten. "What about it?" She gestured for us to sit on one of the benches overlooking the water. "I know this might be difficult to hear, but have you considered selling it?" The question caught me off guard. "Selling? Why would I?" "Not because of what happened," she clarified quickly, "but because it's so large for one person. The maintenance, the property taxes, the utilities. It must be a significant portion of your retirement savings." I couldn't deny the truth in her observation. The brownstone, while valuable, was expensive to maintain. Property taxes alone consumed a significant portion of my pension and savings income. "I've managed so far," I said cautiously. "I know you have." Melissa paused. "But I've been doing some research. There are beautiful apartments in elevator buildings with views like this," she gestured toward the skyline, "that would cost a fraction to maintain, while freeing up capital from the brownstone's equity." I studied her face, searching for hidden motives. "Is this about money? Because if you need—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "God, no. I'm doing fine on my own. This isn't about me needing anything. It's about—" She struggled for words. "It's about wanting you to be secure, to have options, to not be house-rich and cash-poor in your retirement. The concern seemed genuine. Still, after everything that had happened, suspicion came naturally. "And you're bringing this up now because—" "Because I care about your future," she said simply. "And because I've watched you this past winter, Dad. The brownstone takes so much of your energy. The shoveling, the maintenance, the endless repairs. Energy you could be putting toward your writing, your teaching, your life." She was right, though I'd been reluctant to admit it even to myself. The winter had been difficult, with 3 separate plumbing emergencies and a partial roof repair that had strained both my finances and my back. "I'm not saying you should decide right away," Melissa continued. "Just think about it. Consider whether keeping the brownstone is really what you want, or if it's just what's familiar." I promised to think about it, though I had no intention of selling the home where Sarah and I had built our life together. Yet Melissa's words lingered in my mind in the days that followed, surfacing unexpectedly as I wrote checks for utility bills or climbed the stairs with groceries, my knees protesting the 3-story climb. A week later, while cleaning the gutters, a task that had become increasingly difficult with each passing year, I lost my balance on the ladder. The fall wasn't serious. I landed in the bushes below, suffering nothing worse than scratches and bruised dignity. But it forced me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding. The brownstone was becoming too much for me to manage alone. That evening, I called Gloria Ramirez, who had become something of a friend in the months since our professional relationship ended. "I've been thinking about selling the house," I admitted after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "About time," she replied without hesitation. "That place is eating your retirement fund alive." Her frankness made me laugh. "Tell me how you really feel, Gloria. You fought for that house because it was yours," she said more gently. "You won that battle. But winning doesn't mean you have to stay there forever." She was right, of course. The victory had been about principle, not property, about asserting my right to make my own decisions rather than having them made for me. "If I did sell," I said, thinking aloud, "I'd want to stay in the neighborhood." "Brooklyn real estate is hot right now," Gloria noted. "You could sell high, buy something more manageable, and still have a significant nest egg left over." The conversation planted a seed that grew over the following weeks. I began browsing real estate listings, visiting open houses in elevator buildings, imagining a life with fewer stairs and lower maintenance costs. To my surprise, I found the idea increasingly appealing, not as a concession to age, but as a practical choice that would free me for other pursuits. When I mentioned my tentative house hunting to Melissa during our next dinner, her reaction surprised me. Instead of the enthusiasm I expected, she looked stricken. "You're actually considering it?" she asked. "I mean, I suggested it, but I didn't think you'd actually." "It makes sense," I said, puzzled by her response. "You made good points about the maintenance and costs." She nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "It's just, that house has always been home. Even when I didn't live there, knowing it existed, that you were there. It was an anchor. I understood then. Despite everything that had happened, the brownstone represented stability to her, a connection to her mother, to her childhood, to the family we had been. Selling the house doesn't mean erasing those memories," I said gently. "I know that. Intellectually, I know that." She sighed. "I'm being selfish again, aren't I? Thinking about what the house means to me rather than what's best for you." "Not selfish," I corrected. "Human. We attach meaning to places." The conversation shifted to practical matters. Neighborhoods I was considering, features I wanted in a new place. By the time we parted that evening, Melissa had moved from reluctance to cautious support, even offering to help with the search. 2 weeks later, I found it. A 2-bedroom apartment in a pre-war elevator building just 6 blocks from my brownstone. The place had high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and a small balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. Most importantly, it had a sense of possibility that appealed to me, a fresh canvas for this new chapter of my life. I made an offer the same day, and by early May, I was in contract to both sell my brownstone and purchase the apartment. The timing aligned perfectly. I would move directly from one to the other in mid-June, with no need for temporary housing. As moving day approached, I faced the daunting task of sorting through decades of accumulated possessions. What to keep? What to discard? What to give away? Each item carried memories, some painful, others precious. "I can help," Melissa offered during our weekly dinner. "If you want." I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to share this process with her. The brownstone contained physical evidence of her betrayal, empty spaces where furniture had been removed, repairs I'd made to cover holes left by hastily removed artwork. But it also contained evidence of the family we'd once been, photos, mementos, tangible reminders of happier times. "I'd appreciate that," I said finally. We began the following weekend, tackling one room at a time. The process was therapeutic in ways I hadn't anticipated, not just the physical unburdening, but the emotional release of sorting through our shared past together. In Sarah's reading room, Melissa found a box of her childhood drawings, preserved with a teacher's care. "You kept all these?" she asked, wonder in her voice as she flipped through crayon masterpieces from kindergarten. "Of course," I said simply. "You were quite the artist." In my study, we discovered Sarah's journals, neatly stacked on a high shelf. I'd never had the heart to read them after her death, but now Melissa and I sat on the floor together, reading random entries aloud to each other and laughing through tears at Sarah's witty observations about family life. Michael spent 45 minutes today explaining the symbolic significance of curtains in The Great Gatsby to our 7-year-old daughter. Melissa's response: "But Daddy, our curtains are blue because blue is pretty." Sometimes I think he forgets she's a child, not one of his AP students. It's endearing, in its way. The journals became a bridge between us, a connection to Sarah and to the family we'd been before betrayal fractured it. We decided to divide them equally, each taking half to our new homes as a tangible link to the woman who had loved us both. By the second weekend of packing, something had shifted. The careful distance we'd maintained for months had narrowed. We worked together easily, finishing each other's sentences, anticipating each other's needs. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something close to it, a recognition that while the past couldn't be undone, the future remained unwritten. On the final day in the brownstone, after the movers had taken the last of the furniture and boxes to my new apartment, Melissa and I walked through the empty rooms together. "So many memories," she murmured, her voice echoing slightly in the vacant space. I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions, sadness, nostalgia, but also a surprising sense of liberation. The brownstone had been a sanctuary after Sarah's death, but it had also become a mausoleum of sorts, preserving grief alongside memories. In the kitchen, the room where I'd confronted Robert and Melissa about their betrayal, we paused. The counter where I'd placed the evidence of their scheme was bare now, the cabinets empty, the space neutral once more. "I'm sorry," Melissa said quietly. "I know I've said it before, but standing here, where it all happened, I need to say it again. I'm so sorry, Dad." I looked at my daughter, Sarah's daughter, and saw the genuine remorse in her eyes. The anger that had sustained me for so long had gradually transformed into something more complicated, a sadness for what had been lost, but also gratitude for what remained. "I know you are," I said, "and I believe you." Something in my tone made her look up sharply. "Does that mean—" "It means I forgive you," I said, the words surprising me with their rightness. "Not what happened. I'll never be okay with that. But you, Melissa." "Yes, I forgive you." The tears came then, for both of us. Not the harsh, bitter tears of betrayal or the frustrated tears of misunderstanding, but cleansing tears that washed away months of pain and resentment, leaving something tentatively hopeful in their wake. We locked the brownstone for the final time and walked together to my new apartment. The moving boxes created an obstacle course in the living room, but the space already felt like mine, smaller than the brownstone but more manageable, with large windows that flooded the rooms with late afternoon light. "It suits you," Melissa observed, helping me unpack the kitchen essentials. "I think it will," I agreed. We ordered takeout and ate sitting on unpacked boxes, planning where furniture would go and which walls needed painting. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by occasional silences that no longer felt awkward. As evening approached, Melissa gathered her things to leave. At the door, she hesitated. "Dad, thank you, not just for forgiving me, but for showing me that it's possible to rebuild after you've destroyed something precious." I pulled her into a hug, our first genuine embrace since before the betrayal. "Your mother always said you were the strongest of all of us." She was right. After Melissa left, I stood on my new balcony, watching Brooklyn settle into evening. Below, people hurried home from work, couples walked dogs, delivery cyclists navigated traffic. Life continued its relentless forward motion. The betrayal had changed me, hardened me in some ways but softened me in others. I understood now that family wasn't a static thing to be preserved in amber, but a living relationship that could be damaged, healed, reinvented. Robert had been wrong about many things, but perhaps he'd been right about one. The brownstone had become too much for me alone. By trying to force me out, he'd inadvertently set in motion events that led me here, to a place that better suited my current life, with financial security reinforced by the proceeds from the brownstone sale. It wasn't the ending I would have chosen, but standing on my balcony in the gathering dusk, I felt something I hadn't expected: gratitude, not for the betrayal itself, but for the strength it had revealed in me, the resilience it had awakened. Sarah would have appreciated the irony. She always did have a fondness for unexpected plot twists. If this story moved you, please share it and subscribe for more real stories like mine. Thank you for listening.